Hey, meet me in the canteen today. It's important. He was breaking up with me. In the canteen of all places. In front of everyone. I don't understand why he would do this to me. If he's into skinny girls like her, then why did he ever get with me in the first place? I stood in the girls' changing room with my back to everyone, staring at the brick wall in front of me while all the cute girls were getting dressed behind me. This was the worst time of the week, every week. But this time, it was even worse. I put one arm into the sleeve of my shirt. Then I squeezed in the other, when suddenly, rip. Oh my God. I couldn't believe it. My arm had just ripped through the seam of my shirt because they'd gotten so big. I continued to stare at the wall. I didn't take a single breath for what felt like a lifetime as time stood still, when the silence was broken by the sound of the girls giggling behind me. My heart dropped into the bottom of my stomach and I felt sick. I turned around and looked towards my only real friend there for assurance. And as I made eye contact with her, I saw her quickly try and stop laughing and keep a straight face. I felt like the whole world was there to witness my humiliation, when really there were only 6 other girls in there. I quickly had to get the attention away from me being so fat, so I made up an on-the-spot joke. "Ugh! There goes my useless mom again, shrinking my clothes in the washer," I said. "Yeah," a couple of them replied, but I could tell from their expressions that they weren't buying it. I then went to my usual defense mechanism and tried to join in laughing with them, even though I was crying inside. I knew I couldn't keep it together for so long, so I turned back to the wall to hide the tears that slowly rolled down my face as I changed back into my gym clothes. After this, I quickly got dressed and edged my way to the door, making sure not to make eye contact with anyone in there. Like I was invisible. This is something I taught myself as a kid, and it's stuck with me ever since. A bit like, if I can't see them, they can't see me. As soon as I was out the door, I ran down the corridor and into the bathrooms, locking myself in the cubicle and sitting on the closed toilet seat. I was ready to make myself feel better, the only way I knew how. By eating. I reached my hand into my bag and pulled out a bar of chocolate. The feeling I got while holding this crisp wrapper in my hand was instant joy. I knew it was about to enter my mouth, and it couldn't happen soon enough. Then, in a blink of an eye, it was unwrapped and gone. But as soon as the chocolate was gone, all of the sad feelings would return. I left the bathroom in my gym shirt feeling so humiliated. Everywhere I looked, there was another set of eyes that seemed to be looking at me. Did everyone know what happened? They knew I was a fat girl who couldn't even fit into her own clothes anymore? The remaining 4 hours of the day felt like 4 long weeks of embarrassment. Every class, someone else was there to ask, "Hey, where's your shirt?" As if they didn't already know what had happened. At the end of the day, I approached my boyfriend who was standing with his friends. I needed his love right then. But as I got to them, they were all laughing and stopped as soon as they saw I was there. I couldn't believe it. I turned around and walked the long, humiliating road home, knowing the only thing that was going to make me happy was my fridge. The first thing I did when I got inside my house was go to the kitchen, scouting for food. The more I was replaying what had happened in school, the more I ate. I felt like I was trapped in an old school horror zoetrope, and every spin it took meant another mouthful of food. I could hear the rip of my shirt, their laughs and cackles. I could picture their faces spinning around, knowing one thing for sure, that I was going to eat the pain away. One large bite after another. I went to the fridge and took out a large bottle of soda and began gulping. And before I knew it, the deflated bottle was on the counter beside me. I knew that I was eating, but I couldn't see the damage I was doing to myself. Yep, that was me, the story of my life. I was that big girl in class with pimples everywhere on her face, trapped in what seemed like a world of beautiful people. When you spoke to me in school, I would either look at my shoes or look right past you and talk, doing everything possible to avoid eye contact. I was picked on constantly throughout high school, which ruined my self-image. Heck, even one of my brothers said mean things to me. "Here comes the whale," he'd say among other mean nicknames. I didn't like how big I was. In fact, I hated it. But the only way I knew how to cope with my feelings was to eat. The only two things I had in life that made me happy were food and my boyfriend. I spoke with my boyfriend every day, both at school and then we'd text when we got home. He was my rock. I didn't have many friends, so he meant a lot to me. But after the shirt incident, things seemed different. A couple of weeks later, I got a message from him. "Hey, meet me in the canteen today. It's important." He was breaking up with me. In the canteen of all places. But for some reason, I didn't feel like eating. He told me it had nothing to do with me, that he needed to figure his life out before we graduated. He lied. The next day, I found out he was going out with a girl in junior year. Naturally, I felt the need to compare. She was smaller than me, prettier, and smart too. I wished the world would just swallow me up. But instead, guess what I did? I ate. I not only ate heavily after school, but I started buying 3 full cases of chocolate from the store, and I would snack on one whenever I felt stressed out. I gained 50 pounds in a matter of weeks, but looking in the mirror made it look like 100. I had my graduation coming up in a week's time, and there was nothing I would be able to do about it. The day of my graduation, I put on my gown at my house and looked in the mirror. All I saw was disappointment staring back at me. What made it worse, I saw my ex there, and he looked so smart. He looked at me in disgust, and I did what I always do. I looked to the floor and pretended I hadn't seen him, just hoping I would become invisible. Looking back on this makes me hate what I let myself slip into, but I'm so glad it's not that way anymore. What changed? Well, it started when we moved to the States a few years ago to go and live with my third oldest brother, who was a staff sergeant in the Marines. When we moved in with him on base, it was my first time seeing so many men and women in uniform. Not only did they look sharp, but they would walk around carrying their last names with pride. I was in love with the uniform and wanted to look that good. I wanted it so bad, but a part of me doubted the fact that I would be able to lose weight, and I was so embarrassed to ask anyone for help. I started doing YouTube Zumba late at night when it was lights out. I made sure to turn down the volume so I wouldn't wake my parents or my brother. It was hard, but I was going to get through it. I'd done it for weeks and decided it was time to weigh myself. It felt good, stepping onto my scales 1 foot at a time, expecting to be at least 10 pounds lighter. But to my horror, I had only lost 3 to 4 pounds, and it stayed that way for a while. I started feeling sad again, and at that moment, it would have been so easy for me to turn to the fridge for support. But I was determined not to let that happen. So I decided then I was going to run. The very next morning, I found myself in front of the driveway at 6 a.m., nervous and shaking from the cold. What was I even thinking? I couldn't do this. I was about to go back inside and wallow in my self-pity when I saw Mr. Harris, a 54-year-old veteran, jogging in the neighborhood with his service dog. He and my dad got along well, as they're both Marine veterans. I felt something went off inside of me. I felt anger. Anger towards myself for being a nobody. Anger towards the kids that laughed and made fun of me in high school. Anger towards my brother for saying those mean things to me. I took a deep breath and walked to the end of the driveway. I turned and faced the road before me, and I saw our neighbor's mailbox a couple 100 feet down. It was a metal box with a small red flag on the side. It was my goal to start running once I got to it. With every step I took towards that mailbox, I heard every negative thought or thing anyone had ever said to me. reminding me that I'll never make it. Lazy slob. You're weak. With every footstep, another nasty thought rattled through my brain. I was 2 feet away from the mailbox when I decided to jump for it, or I'll never start. I started picking up the pace and controlling my breathing. I remember thinking, it's been a while since I last ran towards anything and not away from things. 5 seconds into it, I felt my lungs burning, and I was gasping for air, but I just kept pushing. I felt pain both physically and emotionally. Warm tears started rolling down my face as I kept on running. All the hurt I was feeling in the past, feeling unworthy, unloved, pressured, everything. I felt it all. I didn't get too far when I stopped and started sobbing uncontrollably. There was no way I could stop myself from crying. Fearing that the middle schoolers waiting for the school bus would see me, I walked towards the park. I sat down on the cold, wet bench and just let it all out. It took me an hour before I could finally stop. I picked myself up and went home. The next day, I was out on the driveway by 6 a.m., determined to do the same thing as the day before. This time, I would go further. I ran and thought about my problems and thought about life to get my mind off of the fact that my lungs were burning and I felt like puking. I repeated this every day until running didn't feel so much like a chore anymore. I wake up, excited to get ready to go running. It became a little private therapy session. I lost a lot of weight and I felt better every time I went back home. For the first time, I learned to love myself. All it takes is one step at a time. Now that I know that I can do it, nothing can hold me back. The past does not define me. The future seems brighter than it did before. I guess the family that owns the mailbox knew that I was using their mailbox as a starting point. They painted it green a couple months later. I found it symbolic. Green means go.